are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast, to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
Before we get into episode number 41, I'm calling this episode the Dirk Nowitzki episode because that was his number on the Mavericks, 41. Shout out to Dirk. Before we get into today's episode, I want to shout out Grind Clothing Co. They are our official merch sponsor, and we have all kinds of great designs available from them. And you can click the link in our description of this video and click the link in our YouTube bio to find all the merch available that is your favorite Detroit Pistons podcast, Revved Up 906. Make sure to rep us while you're on the way to school, when you're lifting, when you're golfing, when you're playing basketball, when you're watching Pistons games. Make sure to rep your favorite Detroit Pistons podcast. So thank you very much to Grind Clothing Co. As you guys have noticed by now, we are on Zoom. We are not in our beautiful podcast studio downtown Marquette, Michigan. We are having some technical difficulties. We are revamping, and Campfire Coworks, our host, are kind of revamping some of our studios. So we will be coming back to a beautiful studio very, very soon. Just bear with us as we are going to be here on Zoom for the time being. Hopefully next week we'll be back in our studio. Make sure to like and subscribe. As you guys know, the YouTube algorithm pushes us out if you show love. So make sure to hit that like button so we can continue to grow and make a big impact on the Michigan community and the Detroit Pistons community specifically. Without further ado, episode number 41. Ryan, this one's a good one because this one, it kind of fires you up on the inside. ESPN has been known to give the Detroit Pistons so much trouble over 50 years. It feels like they've been just beating up on the Pistons. And the ESPN has done it again. Very recently, the NBA power rankings have come out. And in my opinion, it's a little early to put out the power rankings, but obviously it's got to happen. They've got to draw some attention. And ESPN kindly put the Detroit Pistons as the worst team in the league, the 30th best team in today's NBA. And the reason this fires me up, and this is who I want to start off with talking about, is because the Indiana Pacers are listed at 21, the Pistons at 30. That ticks me off. Let's talk about the Indiana Pacers and why the Pistons are better.
Yeah, like you really break down their roster. Like I seriously have to look up who their top three guys are. I mean, obviously you have Tyrese Halliburton, and then you have Miles Turner, and I guess the third best player on that team would be Buddy Hield or something like that, probably. Because I don't think you can't say Jabari Walker is the third best player when he just got drafted. You can't say that. So like you look at their roster. Let me pull it up here real quick. Where is it? When you look at the roster, it's pretty weak. Like
big time.
Like you break it down. Obviously, actually, I will say this: their third best player is Bruce Brown. Their third best player is Bruce Brown. That's signed.
Yeah, they did add him, which is a good addition.
Yes, but like Kendall Brown, no offense, dude. Who are you? Obviously, we love our Michigan natives, Isaiah Jackson. But like you look at the roster, it's pretty weak. I mean, there's a couple like good, solid pieces, good foundation pieces, but then there's a lot of pieces that are also weak. And I know I said Jabari Walker. I meant to say Jarris Walker. My bad. But like this team, it just looks like a team that was thrown together. And so they don't have the chemistry and the camaraderie that you should have to be ranked that high. I mean, 21's pretty low, but it's still higher than the Pistons. And these guys have been together for 2-3 years now. Whereas the Pacers, they just got thrown together this offseason. But now you look at who's coaching them. Obviously, Rick Carlisle, who is a former Piston himself in the coaching realm, was one of our top coaches in recent history. So Obviously, they have a good coach there. They have a good program under him. But still, how can you rank a team like the Pacers, who got thrown together and have had a lot of issues in the last couple of years in keeping the team around? Because, like, think about it. They traded Domantas Sabonis for Tyrese Halliburton, which at that time was kind of a questionable trade. It's like, why are you trading your superstar, your best player on the team, for Tyrese Halliburton? And I mean, yeah, he was having a solid start to his rookie year in Sacramento, but it's still, you're trading Domantas Sabonis. It's not like you're trading nobody to get him. But that was the first flaw. But then you have Miles Turner, who from time to time has been talked about getting traded. It's just, I don't see a reason that the Pacers should be ahead of us.
And for me, the Indiana Pacers coming off the bench at the point guard position have Andrew Nembhard. Okay, well, he made the Rising Stars game. He had a solid rookie year. But when your bench is that weak, where a second round pick last year is who's backing up Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield, the bench just doesn't seem to be there. For me, the Pistons might not have had a winning as close as of a winning record like the Indiana Pacers did, but the Pacers also missed the playoffs. And for me, when I look up and down the roster, I'm not just looking at starters. I know Tyrese was an all-star last year, but who's to say that if Cade Cunningham didn't have an injury, that he wouldn't have been an all-star last year? I think he is better than Tyrese Halliburton. If you had to make me choose over Tyrese Halliburton or Cade Cunningham, I'm taking Cade all day. So for me, our star is better on our team.
Yeah.
And then you look at our roster, and the roster's so deep, man. We got Alec Burks, Monte Morris, Joe Harris, arguably Asar Thompson or Bojan Bogdanovic, Isaiah Stewart. Like, our bench, that's why, like, these power rankings fire me up right now.
Yeah.
And ESPN is always going to bet against the Detroit Pistons. But this year, I truly, truly, in my heart of hearts, think that this is going to be the year where the Pistons fight back against the national narrative. Nationally, we get a narrative that the Pistons are always going to be bad. Every year, they're going to be bad. But I really think this year is going to be the year we get to turn it around. And the fact that the Indiana Pacers are 9 paces above us in the power rankings just seems sacrilegious to me. And it's upsetting.
Yeah.
We see the Houston Rockets at 24, 6 spaces up from the Detroit Pistons. You know that your boys like to hate on the Houston Rockets. Let's talk about Houston's roster right now, because obviously Jalen Green and Cade Cunningham have their longtime rivalry that stems back to high school when Cade Cunningham turkeyed Jalen Green after, like, basically dunking right in front of him. It goes way back then when Cade kind of started the rivalry. And then we saw Jalen Green 2 seasons ago getting Cade Cunningham's face after a nice slam when they made it to the NBA. The rivalry against the Houston Rockets is going to be a thing of the future. We're going to be dealing with it for a long time. How did the Houston Rockets end up 6 spaces ahead of the Detroit Pistons?
The media. That's how.
Yeah.
When you think about it, like, their roster, well, everybody knows by now my takes on their roster. It sucks, but when you look at who they have, I mean, obviously this draft class is up this year is, like, pretty solid for them. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty solid. Obviously, Amen Thompson, Asar's brother. Obviously, he is a promising young prospect for sure. Cam Whitmore, who there's nobody knows exactly to why he fell as far as he did, but, like, the Pistons pretty much the workout with the Pistons did not go good. He had a lingering knee issue. And then on top of that, apparently the questions they asked him, it did not go over well for him because he was kind of like lying and saying like, no, like it was just not good. And so you kind of question the character there of Cam Whitmore. Now, I'm not saying he's not a top tier freak of an athlete because he can be. But you look at the roster, their best player, obviously Jabari Smith Jr. But then it's like, who do you go from there? Realistically, because Jalen Green, I think is overrated. A lot of people think is overrated, but a lot of the media think he's pretty solid. Dylan Brooks, that signing, obviously we've hated on him a lot because he's not good, but he's better than us. I gotta keep pointing that out. He is better than us. He did make it to the NBA. We're talking about the Pistons on a podcast. Just saying. But like the only reason why the Rockets are that high is because of their free agency. Like you landed Fred VanVleet, who is above average point guard that's going to get you solid play time every single night he steps out there. And you get a guy like Dylan Brooks, who probably shouldn't have gotten cut from the Grizzlies, but did because of his mouth. And then like Jock Landale there was pretty solid in Phoenix, was it last year? That he wasn't bad. And then the draft class this past year isn't terrible. Kevin Porter Jr. is solid. Alperen Sengun, love the guy. He's legit. He honestly, I think he's the best player on that team. Honestly, even better than Jabari Smith Jr. and then Tari Eason. But like, you look at that team, it's weaker than us by far.
Yeah.
Like we not only have the talent, but we have the depth. They may have a smidge of talent, but they don't have the depth because obviously they're probably going to roll out with Fred VanVleet at the 1, Jalen Green at the 2, Dylan Brooks at the 3, Jabari Smith at the 4, and then Alperen Sengun at the 5. That's probably going to be their lineup, right? Obviously, the reason why I didn't say Amin Thompson is just because of the fact that he's coming off an injury from Summer League and then probably just going to want to slowly ease him on in, kind of like what we're going to do with Asar. Obviously, Asar never got injured, but we're slowly going to ease him in. It's just common sense in that situation. Although they're pretty stupid in Houston, but yeah.
So I want to break down for the listeners Dylan Brooks and Monte Morris and why I prefer to add a guy like Monte Morris rather than Dylan Brooks. Dylan Brooks last season averaged 14 points, 3 rebounds, almost 2 assists, and 36% from the field. Okay, Monte Morris, backup point guard. I know they're different positions, but Monte Morris, 10 points, 4 rebounds, nearly 6 assists, and shot 48% from the field. I'd rather have Monte Morris on my team than Dylan Brooks. One, because Dylan Brooks at times demands the ball. Monte Morris continues to be a facilitator. When you have a guy like Monte Morris coming off your bench that's nearly as good as Dylan Brooks as far as nationally acclaimed, how are the Houston Rockets 6 spaces ahead? The Pistons bench in itself is going to be something that I keep bringing this back to all episode because I understand we don't have that solidified star, but neither do the Houston Rockets. Jalen Green struggled to be consistent last year. Fred VanVleet, a past all-star. Okay, maybe 1 year, I think, maybe not even. I've drawn a blank. But for me, it's like I don't see the Houston Rockets being solidified as 6 paces above the Detroit Pistons. And it puts me in awe continuing.
Yeah. And honestly, maybe the addition of even adding a coach like Ime Udoka to the team, maybe that's why it pushed them up because, okay, he is a good coach, but what he did in Boston, that's a no-no. You can't do that. So as much as he is a good coach, there is flaws to his character. And obviously Houston, they don't know exactly what they're doing, obviously, because you look at their roster. I mean, they have one of the youngest rosters in the league by far. And their talent, like, I'd rather have a star than Cam Whitmore. I'd rather have a star than Amon. I'd rather have a star than all their rookies, all their second-year players, all their first-year players from this past season. I'd rather have a star than everybody on their roster, pretty much. I mean, obviously, Jawari Smith Jr. and Alperen Sengun and Tari Eason are legit. Don't get me wrong. But, like, you look at the depth of like what we have in terms of caliber, like James Wiseman. Yeah, he was the second overall pick, and he probably should have been better than he is right now. But that's what happens when you get injured and you don't get as much of an opportunity as one player would at that age. Like Jabari Smith walks in, gets a great opportunity right away. Whereas James Wiseman walks into a situation with Golden State where he's not going to get a ton of playing time because they're contending for a championship. So, like, you look at our roster with even like Marvin Bagley. Yeah, he did get an opportunity at first with Sacramento, but I said this numerous times in our last couple episodes that even though he did get that opportunity, he never had the same coach. He always had a new coach every year. He always had a new GM every year. So it's like, yeah, we're taking on former supposed to be stud players. They still can be that. It's just, it's going to take time. They're a little bit of a project. But we saw Marvin Bagley take a jump from where he had been the previous season. So it's like these guys are slowly getting along and getting to where they should be. And then you add a coach, and a great guy in Monty. Like, who's to say we couldn't do what Monty did with the Suns that first season?
Right. Another thing that stands out to me when looking at these rankings is we see the Charlotte Hornets at 27. And obviously, they added Alabama rookie Brandon Miller, who struggled throughout Summer League. And they put Charlotte at 27. And then the Portland Trailblazers, who added Scoot Henderson and have the future Hall of Famer, in my opinion, and Damian Lillard at 28. And then the Washington Wizards added Jordan Poole. They're at 29, and they had a 35-47 record. For me, in my opinion, Jordan Poole right now is better than Brandon Miller. We're not talking about where the Charlotte Hornets are going to be in 4 years. We're talking about what they are right now. So for me, I just think that these last like 6, 7, 8 spots, ESPN just totally flipped it on its head, in my opinion. I just don't see it working. And, in my opinion, I would see San Antonio behind Detroit. I know they took in Victor Wembanyama, but their roster is terrible. They're not good at all. And the Charlotte Hornets, I know they got LaMelo Ball. I know they added Brandon Miller, but they don't have the kind of bench Detroit does. I put the Pistons in front of Detroit. And the Pistons in front of Detroit. I put the Spurs, the Hornets, the Portland Trailblazers all behind the Detroit Pistons. I think they got them teams beat. I think they got Houston beat too, but the Pacers, you can make the argument. I get it, but it's also like I see the Pistons hovering around that 25, 26 mark.
Yeah, you named those teams in which we're better than. I agree. We're better than the Wizards. We're better than Portland. We're better than the Hornets. We're better than the Spurs. We're better than the Raptors. We're better than the Rockets. We should be sitting at or darn near close to 23. I mean, we're better than the Pacers. I mean, you can argue that, 35-47, that's not too far out of a ballpark of making the postseason. And the year before that, they made the postseason. So they're not a terrible, terrible team because they have a solid foundation, a solid coach, like we said. But it's still, their roster is still weak. Even like the Utah Jazz, who were sneaky good this past season for pretty much flipping their entire team, aka Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, for a ton of picks and players, and yet still were decent. I think Yeah, Utah should be ahead of us still. I think they are slightly better. Brooklyn, I think we're better than Brooklyn. I really do. I think we're better
Hey,
than Brooklyn. And a lot of people would say, hey, Brian, shut up. That's a hot take. But no, I'm not, because we are better than Brooklyn. You look at their roster, realistically, it's just Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson.
dude,
That's the
that's it.
roster. I mean, and Spencer Dinwiddie. It's just pretty much those three, right? And like their draft picks this past year, like they're not good. Like I don't even know who they took because they're not named players. They're not big name
Yeah.
players. So like obviously I'm not doubting their potential and what they could be, but it's like you look at their draft class, you look at their roster, their three best players. After that, it's a clear drop off, right? You look at Atlanta. I think we're better than Atlanta. That is a very hot take, but I think we are. Like they've had the same team for how long now, and they still can't make the cut in the playoffs. Like, how
Right.
can't you? Everybody goes like, "Hey, Trae Young is a superstar. He's one of the best players in the NBA." If he was
Can't
so
win.
good, and I know it's not an individual game, but if he was so good, why haven't they made the second round, third round? They had a first round exit this past year. Finished 41-41. Yeah, that's 500. That's better than Detroit's record this past year. 17 wins, not good. But still, like there's no reason why we aren't better than Atlanta. I think we're still better than the Pelicans. I think we are. Obviously, you look at the roster, you have CJ McCollum, Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, like all these guys, right? But Zion sucks. Like he was a number one pick. I think he's a bust. I really do. I think he's a bust. You look at Minnesota. Minnesota. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent right now, but I'm just throwing this out there. Minnesota, you look at their roster, their best player is Anthony Edwards, and after that, it's a fast drop off. Like they don't really have a lot of good players there. Obviously, they have our Luca Garza. We love Luca.
Oh
He
yeah.
did a solid job for us, but at times he still sucked. But we still like you. But like I don't. But once you hit 15, I think that's fine. That those teams are better than us. There's no arguments there. Although I will slightly argue that the Lakers are not better than us. I think we're right there with them.
Yeah.
I think like the Knicks, I think we're right there with them. They just have more experience, right? But like from Minnesota at 16 down, I think we're better than every single one of those teams, excluding the Chicago Bulls and the Orlando Magic. I think the Magic have a slight edge on us, and the Bulls, when
Yeah.
you have DeMar DeRozan, who's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and then you have like Lonzo Ball. Granted, he's not playing right now; he's injured, but the roster they have there, it's better than ours.
I mean, I feel like we're just representing every Detroit Piston fan whenever they see an ESPN thing. Like we're just speaking for the people. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like. You know, Instagram always goes crazy in the Detroit Pistons community whenever ESPN speaks on us. For me, I want to talk about Asar Thompson for a little bit because when looking at all these teams that we think we're better than, a lot of them have those small forwards like the Timberwolves with Anthony Edwards and the Pelicans with Brandon Ingram and the Chicago Bulls and Zach LaVine. In the past, when we've played teams with great small forwards, we struggled. They just eat us up. It happened in the mid 2000s. Carmelo Anthony, we'd play the Knicks 4 or 5 times a year, and he would eat us alive, and we couldn't do much about it. Well, we have a new man in town by the name of Asar Thompson. And all the teams that we used to struggle to guard because we didn't have the small forward to do it, well, Pistons fans, you're in luck because we got Asar Thompson. That's why I think adding a guy like Asar, and I know Amen's good in Houston, I understand. Asar Thompson is going to be able to add a defensive threat the Pistons haven't had in years at the small forward position. Stanley Johnson was supposed to do it back in 2015. Then LeBron averages 35 points in the playoff series. Asar Thompson, I don't think is letting LeBron average 35 points in a series. Just
He's
saying.
not letting 40-year-old LeBron do that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So it's like, I know some people are going to think we're crazy for holding the Pistons in such high regard, but you don't know what Asar Thompson's about to do his rookie year. You don't know how James Wiseman and Jalen Duren are going to mix. Neither do we, obviously, but we are predicting that it's going to mix well from what we saw in Summer League and what we know from the coaches they've added to this franchise. And Monty Williams, Mark Bryant, Spencer Rivers, Jarrett Jack, the list goes on, really. Steven Silas. It's crazy. This Pistons team is going to make a great jump this year, and I do not hate your point of saying that they could be top 17, right around that 16, 17 mark, once the Pistons start the season with the over 500 record. That's my prediction.
Mark my words right now. This upcoming season, we may shock the world.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm right there with you. We got the roster.
We do. There's no reason why any of those other teams are better than us. I mean, yeah, they have a little bit more experience and maybe a slightly more like a higher advantage of the fact that they have an established coach and program that they've built up. Maybe that's a slight advantage there. And yeah, maybe their one player is better than our one player at that position. But still, I think we could compete with those guys. Our guys just need to come together like they were supposed to by now. And then, like, you named all those additions that we had this offseason. And then you look at what we have, like, there's no reason why we can't take a major jump this upcoming season.
Yeah, completely agree. Real quickly, before we wrap up episode number 41, the Dirk Nowitzki episode, the NBA 2K updated their ratings for the upcoming season for each player. Cade Cunningham in NBA 2K24, his overall right now is 84. Your first thoughts, real quick.
No, he should be higher. He should be higher. Well, like they showed Victor's ranking coming in, his rating there. They put him at 84 overall. Now I understand he's a generational talent and everything, but there's no reason for him and Cade to have the same rating.
Yeah. Give Cade an 85, 86.
I think he should at least be an 87 overall.
Ooh, I like it.
He's that good. He backed KD down in the paint his rookie season and scored on him every single time.
Yeah. By the end of hot take, by the end of this upcoming season, Cade Cunningham, 89, 90 overall. I'm just saying, give it to us, 2K. Give it to him.
Except everybody hates on us, so it's not gonna happen. But
well, hey, as long as the 2K creators aren't looking at any of the ESPN articles, we're all good. Just don't look at ESPN. Don't pay for any subscriptions to ESPN. Quit it. That will do it for today's episode number 41. We talked about an ESPN article that hopefully we never have to talk about again. We will make sure to like and subscribe, and we appreciate you guys for tuning in. We will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.